Welcome to the Story Learning Podcast, regular doses of language learning tips and motivation to help you become fluent in any language. With me, Olly Richards. For language programs, books, free resources, and much more, visit StoryLearning.com. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the I Will Teach You a Language podcast. Hope you're having a wonderful day so far, wherever you are in the world. I'm excited about the end of August. I'm going to the Montreal Language Festival in, you guessed it, Montreal. I'm going to be hanging out with some wonderful people, other polyglots, language experts, and I've mentioned it a few times, but what the heck. If you are near Montreal, don't miss this. It's going to be really fantastic, and search for Montreal Language Festival online. You'll find it there. You can get, I believe, a 25% discount on tickets as well if you use the code Olly, O-L-L-Y. So a little insider tip for you there. Today we've got a question that really made me think. Let's get into today's question from Jane.
Hi Olly, Jane from the United States here. And first of all, I wanted to thank you for making such an excellent podcast. It's absolutely amazing and I love it so much. I found I Will Teach You a Language after spending about 3 years learning Spanish in high school and barely being able to have a conversation. About 8 months ago, I discovered the podcast along with your website and other resources from other polyglots like Benny Lewis and Luca Lampariello. Anyway, and I made so much progress in my Spanish through independent study alongside classroom instruction with an excellent teacher. Props to Profe, my high school Spanish teacher, that I'm now moving on to Portuguese, which I'm super excited about. Having 3 languages in my head has been a really interesting experience. Rather than having 1 or 2 words for something like a pineapple, I now have 3. And it got me thinking, what is it like to have so many languages in your head? When you see a pineapple, do you think of 7 different words or do you just recognize it in English? Basically, how do you keep yourself sane with all that linguistic knowledge in your mind? Thank you so much. I hope you have an awesome day and see you later, I guess.
Hello, Jane. Thank you for a lovely message. I really enjoyed listening to that. The short answer is I just don't really worry that much about it. That's how I stay sane. It's a really interesting question, and I don't want to sound too flippant by saying that I don't really worry about it, but generally, and genuinely, I don't. In terms of learning, like I only ever focus on one language at a time. So my kind of active language learning focus is only ever on one language. So to that extent, I don't really have that much confusion in the learning process. But I do tend to use a lot of my languages out and about around, around London in my day-to-day life. And I find that it's a big mix, languages come and go. It depends who I'm spending time with, what I'm doing, what words I need. If I go through a phase of speaking more French than usual, for example, which I mean at the moment, I'll find that French words kind of come to the fore. But then other times I might be focusing on another language a bit more. But my default is English, and I use English more than anything else. And to that extent, what I tend to find happens is that a couple of things, I guess. I often talk to myself. I'll be walking down the street and I'll try and say something in different languages, and it's a nice little exercise to try and just keep that language a bit active in your brain. But more often than not, what happens in somewhere like London is that I just kind of hear a bunch of people speaking, and my brain immediately switches into that zone. And I find that I'm getting better and better at it. So to give you an illustration, when I first learnt, you mentioned Spanish and Portuguese, right? Now, I learnt Spanish first, and then I went to Brazil, and I learnt Portuguese. Now, in Brazil, as my Portuguese got better, at that time I wasn't using Spanish, so I remember going back to Europe and meeting my Spanish friend Patricia, and we were talking in Spanish, and she was like, "Olly, man, what has happened to your Spanish? Like, it's all over the place." I was speaking with this weird kind of Portuguese grammar full of infinitives and stuff, and not conjugating my verbs in Spanish. It was really kind of messed up. So I experienced what it's like to have that kind of confusion. And I think, like Jane, one of the things that you're going to discover, I think, moving from Spanish to Portuguese is that they're so similar. There's a lot of scope for confusion. What happened with me was that I had that kind of shock of like, oh my God, like I am, I'm just, my brain's a bit of a mess, like scrambled eggs or something inside. But what happened was, because I worked at using Spanish and Portuguese at the same time, so I would go out and with friends speak Spanish and Portuguese in the same night, I would kind of learn to separate it, and I would get good at switching between the two. And the best I can describe it, I think, is you just try to compartmentalize it in your brain. So when, for example, just a few hours ago in the park, I heard a Brazilian girl on the phone to her friends, trying to let them know whereabouts she was. And so I heard her talking. It's like, está onde? Você está me vendo ou não? Eu tô aqui no centro do parque. Você não tá vendo? Eu não sei onde você tá, cara. I don't know what she was saying. And immediately, like, something clicks in my brain. It's like a switch goes off. And I immediately, like, any kind of traces of French or Japanese or English even just disappear. And my brain it's like a part of my brain is immediately activated that is Portuguese. And it doesn't matter that I haven't spoken Portuguese for months. That just activates it. The other day I was in a cafe, I remember, and I had a heavy bag in one hand and a coffee in the other hand. And I was trying to get out of the cafe, but then there were these... London's full of, like, exchange students at the moment. It's a bit annoying, actually, because everywhere you go, there's just, like, huge groups of kids in the way. And one such group of Spanish kids was just sort of mindlessly blocking the door of this cafe, just sort of sitting down when people were trying to pass. And I heard they were speaking Spanish. I spoke to them in Spanish without even thinking. Often I try to speak to people in English in the UK because I think it's kind of a courtesy to them. But I just turned and said to her, "Me dejas salir, por favor? Can you let me out?" And she kind of just turned around and said, "Sí, claro." And it's like this little Spanish exchange that happened simply because I heard her speaking Spanish and my brain kind of switched into Spanish. 2 days ago, I was walking through Soho in central London and walked past this Japanese restaurant where my friend Takeshi works. And I kind of saw him walking out. I was like, "Hey, Takeshi." And we sat and we started talking, and we were speaking in English actually, but then the friend I was with said, "Can you guys speak some Japanese? Have you?" And actually, we'd never spoken Japanese together, and I was like, "そう、まだ喋ってないですね、Takeshi-san." We haven't we'd never spoken Japanese together, right? He's like, "No." So we spoke a bit of Japanese, and straight away, because I could smell the food coming out of the cafe, and I was looking at a Japanese face, my head goes straight back to Japanese. And I think that because I'm getting used to doing that, to using all these words, these languages kind of together, as it were, I'm getting better at doing just that. But I do remember when I was living in Japan for quite a long period, 3 to 4 years, during that time I didn't speak any of my other languages. So I remember when I went back to try to speak Spanish after living in Japan for a few years, I really struggled actually, because my brain was in Japanese mode for so long. So it's interesting to think about this, Jane. You've made me think that actually I'm learning to use all of these different languages together and probably compartmentalizing my brain in different ways. So, and of course it's true that sometimes words in other languages will kind of pop up and get into my head inadvertently without me realizing. Yesterday I was chatting to a friend in Cantonese, and I was saying something about my life. I don't know what I was saying. And I said, and so what I did there was I was saying, what I found in my life is that this, that, and the other. And I used the word, to say life in Cantonese should be sangwo. But I said jinsei, which is like taking a Japanese word by mistake and imposing these Cantonese tones on it. So life in Japanese is jinsei. But I took the tones from Cantonese, which is tones 1 and 6, like that, sangwo, and I said jinsei, and my friend just looked at me and said, "What? What are you talking about?" And I was, "Oh, damn! Sorry, that was Japanese." And so, who knows where that came from? Like, that's just like totally out of the blue. And this stuff happens, but it's never a problem, and more often than not, it's just funny. Like we had a laugh about it, and say, "Oh man, I'm mixing up Japanese and Cantonese," and she's like, "Oh wow, that's interesting," and blah blah blah. So it's kind of cool, I don't know. I suppose I'd rather have this problem than not, and it certainly makes life more interesting and more colourful. There are also times when I meet somebody and they're like, they're really irritating times when someone says, "Oh, speak German or speak French." And it's like, like, trying to test you and stuff. And in those situations, often it takes you a bit of time for your brain to switch, if you don't have a particular stimulus. And so often, that can be a bit of a pain sometimes when it takes you a bit, a few minutes to just kind of adjust to the new language. But it's very rarely an issue. And more often than not, it's something that I try to embrace. And so yeah, Jen, you're gonna experience some of this with Portuguese as well. It's gonna be interesting for you. So enjoy. I hope that was insightful. It's just really me talking about what I'm going through. So I'm not sure if there's anything you can draw from that, but I guess the main thing is to just always remember to enjoy it. And it's always a process. And these languages that I use on a regular basis are far from perfect. But I am conscious that I'm improving. Not necessarily getting that much better at the languages, but getting better at using them and making them part of my life. So to that extent, I'm pretty happy. So thanks for the question, Jen. I really enjoyed answering that. Hope it was insightful for you. If you would like to leave me a question for the podcast, then please go to iwillteachyoualanguage.com/ask to do that. I'd also really appreciate a review of the podcast. I know it sounds silly, but these reviews on iTunes really help, because what happens is when iTunes sees reviews coming in, it then bumps up the podcast and shows it to more people. So if you think more people should learn languages, please take a second to leave me a review. You see what I did there? That kind of psychological trick. Anyway, at the end of every episode, I like to leave you with a resource on the topic of the show. And today, I'm going to give you a video. This is a video that my friend Jan from the Netherlands shot in Cairo. He traveled to Egypt to visit me, and we shot this video of me walking around the streets of Cairo, using some Arabic and talking about languages. It's really cool. Jan did a great job with the video. If you haven't seen it, you must go and watch it, because I think it's lots of people like the video. I'll put it in the show notes. So to check out this video, which you can watch on your phone or on your computer, wherever it may be, go to iwillteachyoualanguage.com/episode 209. All right, that's what I got for you. See you in the next episode.
Thanks for listening to today's episode, and in case you didn't already know, I teach languages in a rather unusual way, through stories. Now, stories are a great way to learn a new language, because when you're engrossed in a story, you remember things more easily, and the mechanics of the language just start clicking inside your brain. It's quite something, and if you'd like to find out how you can learn a new language or improve your skills in a language that you already know, and do it with the power of stories, then you should check out my free Story Learning Kit, which will teach you exactly how this method works and how you can use it yourself to learn a new language. Visit storylearning.com/podkit, that's PODKIT, to get free access. Inside, you'll find explanatory videos, masterclasses, worksheets, short stories to practice with, and much, much more. Once again, that is storylearning.com/podkit, PODKIT. And if you're lucky, you might also find a link in the podcast description or show notes of this episode.